Action.
Hi everyone, we're here today with Dr. David Liberman, a famous world-renowned speaker, New York Times bestselling author, and just a wealth of wisdom. We're happy to have you on the show.
My pleasure.
Yeah, I just wanted to contextualize a little bit what we're doing here. For us, Hishtadlus is a show really for us to, share our own experiences, but also, facilitate other people's sharing of ideas, paradigm shifts, things that can help us get unstuck in the workforce. And Dr. David has been influential in many areas of life, whether it's a relationship between oneself and others, between oneself and God. Has been helpful to many people and from a diverse set of backgrounds in these areas. So we're hoping that he'll be able to bring some insight and perspective to our audience, our growing audience of people that are looking to upgrade the way they operate in business. So thank you for coming. I guess we can start off with the first book.
Well, you just brought up an interesting thing.
Okay.
David, as about tshuva, how do you find the frum outlook of business versus the non-frum view of business? Is there a significant paradigm shift in the approach that you would say that you could talk towards?
That's an interesting question. Are you not supposed to remind me of that, by the way? You're not, here I am. I've been like for 16 years, not a single person suspects a thing. My gosh, with my flawless Hebrew and pronunciation. It's a very good question. So, yes, no doubt there are some distinctions. The advantage that the frum community has that other communities don't have is here. I actually just had a conversation with a friend of mine about this. He goes, here, you're going to talk and meet people that you never would have had access to otherwise. The guy who davens next to you in shul runs, 40 nursing homes. This person is in charge of this plumbing, so whatever. So, in the rest of the world, maybe you got 6 degrees of separation. Here you have 2. Everyone knows someone who knows someone. So you do have access. Obviously, you have to be responsible and respectful in terms of how you engage that person. But the ability to be able to learn also from other experts in the field, I think, is unparalleled.
Wow.
Right?
Very interesting. Yeah, no, that's super helpful. I think we don't realize how lucky we are that we have that ability to just, when we're in shul or whatever it is, just go over to somebody afterwards and ask for help or talk. They don't really have that. They build these walls and gated communities to protect themselves from it.
That's right. I think
it's fascinating.
In what other community do you have people knocking on your doors simply to ask you for money who you don't know? I mean, it only exists. And we open the door.
And we actually give money.
We give money. We invite them in. We give them something to drink and eat. Where else do you find that?
It's true.
Extraordinary.
I will say another piece that I think is, I heard from somebody who actually invests in local businesses. And he told me that we don't realize it, but we have our own microeconomy that's completely self-sufficient. Somewhat self-sufficient, more so than other communities have. So I'm curious, as to get into the actual operations and nitty-grittiness and just actual having to work and not just be friendly networking with the guy next to you and show. What are some things that you feel that we can get better at?
It's a good question. So my opinion, I do think that we are disadvantaged insofar as recognizing that there is a hierarchy and a structure in the regular business world. I mean, if you look at the military, you wouldn't have a corporal knock on the tent or the door of a general and say, hey, I got an idea. But, in our community, and even though, again, it can be a minor to a big extent, but it is important to recognize that there is a hierarchy, there is a structure, and in a corporate setting, even though a person may find it frustrating, there's what to be said for a chain of command. And I think that the ability to recognize that would allow a person to ascend much more quickly. Secondly is, I think that, certainly not by everyone, and we're painting with a broad brush here, but nobody knows everything. Also, most people don't know what they don't know, right? So, it is good in all our relationships, personal and professional, and certainly in the business world, to recognize that when somebody introduces an idea to you, even if it sounds unfamiliar, even if it doesn't sound like it's going to make sense. There's what to be said for taking a step back and hearing it. I had a conversation once again recently with somebody who is a master sales trainer, and he's been doing this for decades. And he'll speak to people in organizations, and sometimes you'll have, guys who are young, maybe this is their first sales job, and they'll not just question what this person says, but they'll outright disagree, which is fine. But it's not disagreeing in terms of I don't understand, it's no, you're wrong and I'm right. So again, there's what to be said for being open-minded in terms of learning new skills.
And any specific practical tips that one can use to gain some more open-mindedness in this?
Good. Look, in all of our relationships, the ability to be vulnerable. When you're vulnerable, the reason why most people are not vulnerable is because if they find out that what they believe isn't true or what they thought isn't accurate, then they begin to question who they are. So the degree to be able to be okay with new information, with obviously learning and growing, and that's how you grow, is you can't stay cut off and disconnected and make yourself not vulnerable and expect to connect or to grow. So the ability to be able to take those hits, recognizing that there's no such thing as failure, there's just feedback. In other words, you try something, you hear something, if it doesn't work, if you have the mindset that it's failure, you're not going to want to venture out of your comfort zone. If you have the mindset that it's always about feedback, and you can adjust and readjust your course in order to move forward more responsibly, then you're going to welcome the opportunity for more information.
Yeah, no, I can really appreciate that, because I've recently coined the term for myself as somewhat of a mantra for me that for a particular stage of growth that I'm going through right now, is this idea that I'm pivoting away from my ego. That means, my ego I've assigned, this is how I have to do it. And my ego is bought in, it's invested in a particular set of outcomes.
But that's great that you brought up the ego. I'm saying, people don't necessarily realize how much of a role the ego plays in our life.
Right.
I know that you like to talk about that a little bit. I'm going to let you just tell our audience a little bit how the ego, how to deal with one's ego.
So as you know, I've written 12 books, and we talk about the ego in all of them. Because here in a nutshell is how it works. You have self-esteem, the degree to which a person loves themselves and feels worthy of good things in life. I'm loved and lovable. That's the degree to which I recognize that I'm okay, I accept myself as I am. The degree to which I don't love myself, I don't accept myself, the ego is going to engage. The ego is a false self, the part of me that wants to project an image of what I'm not, and also wants to protect my insecurities. So it's like a seesaw, one goes up, the other goes down. When a person has low self-esteem, they generally naturally going to have a big ego, because the ego says, let me be right, because I can't question who I am, I can't question what I believe, I can't question what I think. So the degree to which ego is engaged, you're not going to want to venture out of your comfortable waters. You're not going to want to take risks. You're not going to want to be vulnerable because it's scary. So ultimately, the capacity to be able to accept oneself, to love oneself, obviously it's a lifelong objective, and we can make progress along the way. But that pursuit of really wholly, completely accepting yourself is what will organically allow the ego to diminish and a person to move naturally outside their comfort zone. Let me just share with you, Dr. Abraham Tversky, who recently passed, he gives a great mashal about a lobster, of all things. He says when a lobster wants to shed its shell, it can't grow beyond that. So it literally comes out of the shell, it goes to a quiet place, and then it forms a new, bigger shell which can grow. He goes, if the lobster was in therapy, the therapist would have given him Xanax, said, I know it's anxious, I know it's worrying, just stay here, stay where you are, stay comfortable, and don't move. But sometimes it's going to require growth coming out of your shell, and it's scary, but make no mistake. And I know we're throwing a lot out and jumping into different arenas without necessarily fleshing it out, so feel free to ask any questions on any of this. But the opposite of depression, or the ability, once again painting with a broad brush, but the opposite of feeling stuck is expression. And there's a person who feels down, who feels out, who feels like they're just not moving their life forward, undoubtedly is that somebody who doesn't feel like they're able to express who they are. Their neshama, their soul and their body, there's a disconnect. And in 120, it will be disconnected, and that feeling of death is that taste of depression, meaning that it's like we're just not moving ourselves forward. So, when we're able to express ourselves and move authentically forward, you're going to reignite the neshama, you're going to infuse yourself with a greater sense of self-esteem, and the ego will naturally diminish.